In 1928, Meriam was asked by the U.S. Department of the Interior to examine the education of Native American students after 50 years of insufficient education and life in boarding schools. His thorough report became known as the Meriam Report, and it represented a turning point that led to the beginning of reconstructing Native American education. The Meriam Report informed there was an absence of well-trained teachers and staff. Without well-trained teachers, Native American students faced limitations and educational barriers that left them without adequate preparation for life after boarding school. This report depicts the heartbreaking and inhumane reality of the children who were removed far from their tribe, family, and friends and placed in a European American learning system that attempted to rob them from their culture and identities. The conditions of these schools were horrific, and students were subjected to overcrowding in dorms, lack of nutrition, poor diet, and diseases like tuberculosis and trachoma. Sadly, death was not uncommon, and most of these deaths were preventable had the students been supplied with decent diets. The school staff and educators were subpar and undertrained due to lack of funding. This meant low salaries and adoption of low standards for teacher entrance. Lack of funding also affected the aid children received when they left school to find employment away from reservations or when they returned home. Rather than encouraging children to continue education beyond boarding schools, they left students with no preparation or opportunities for trade work. In addition, Native American students above the 4th grade worked for half a day and went to school for half a day, which left no time for recreation or free time, and raised the issue of child labor laws. Teachers of industrial work defended this child labor as work done primarily for the industrial education of the child, but in reality, children were just used for production work for the maintenance of the boarding school. The Meriam Report stated that Native American education needed a change in point of view and an understanding of Native Americans as human beings. Teachers needed to provide material that connected to Native American life, or at least within the scope of the children's experiences, because students need mental backgrounds to understand and make connections with new information. Students also needed to be brought back home to their families for healthy development and support. The extensive data provided by the Meriam Report further exposed the government's oppressive practices towards Native Americans and helped influence federal policy.